It is the Resistance Report, August 23rd, 2017. We've come back to you. We're going to be Mondays and Wednesdays from now on at this time, 8 o'clock on the East Coast, 5 o'clock on the West Coast, and in between. There is a lot to talk about, and unfortunately, we've got to start with this man. Do you recognize him? You may recognize him now. He is Donald Trump. And last night in Phoenix, he did and said a bunch of things. I want to just talk about three of them because they are indicative of what we are up against now as we move into month number 8. Month number 8 of Donald Trump. Now, the first thing he did last night in Phoenix, he threatened to shut down the federal government if Congress did not give him the money he wants to build his wall across the southern border. So, shutting down government if he doesn't get his way. Yes, that is what a true Democratic president would do. Not. Trump is supposed to be president of the United States, responsible for faithfully executing the law and upholding the Constitution, but with his threat to close down the government, if he doesn't get the money he wants, he's acting like a two-bit dictator. Can I just remind you, you know this, our government was designed precisely to prevent this kind of dictatorial one-man rule. So, you know, if you don't get what you want, you can shut down the government. Now, there's a second thing. Last night, Trump also implied that he planned to pardon Joe Arpaio. Pardon me, pardon Arpaio, Joe, pardon Joe. Now, Joe Arpaio is the former sheriff of Maricopa County, Arizona, who became a national symbol of the crackdown on undocumented immigrants with his round-em-up searches of anybody who even looked Latino. And by the way, they were searches that were found by the courts to be illegal, which is why Arpaio is facing prison. But Trump doesn't care about the courts. Trump wants to divide America, and that's why he said last night at his rally, was Sheriff Joe convicted for doing his job? And then, of course, everybody whooped and cheered. Well, he was not convicted for doing his job. He was convicted for not doing his job. And then Trump says, well, let me make a prediction. I think he's going to be just fine. That means Trump is thinking about pardoning him. Again, talk about dictatorial rule, forgetting the rule of law. And finally, last night, Trump also renewed his attack on journalists. But not just on any journalists. These are journalists who write unfavorable stories about Trump. And what did he do? He calls them sick people and accuses them of disliking America, being unpatriotic. Trump is the president of the United States. He's trying to stir up people against the free press because he doesn't like what they say about him. If this, my friends, is not unconstitutional and dangerous to democracy, I don't know what is. Shame on him. Does he have no decency? We've endured this man, Donald Trump, for just over 7 months. Although he has had few legislative victories, he's almost single-handedly destroyed the moral authority of the presidency of the United States, at home and abroad. And he has brought us to the brink of a nuclear war without consulting anybody, without even consulting anybody in the White House. He has sown division and hatred. He's threatened our democratic form of government. He's given encouragement and legitimacy to the ugliest in America, the ugliest aspects of America. How, I want to ask you, can we endure another 41 months of this man? In 7 months, look at the damage he's done. 41 more? Now, some people say, well, we just have to wait for Robert Mueller, you know, the special counsel who's investigating the connections between Trump and the Trump campaign and Russia so that Mueller will come up with evidence of Russian collusion. But here's the problem. Even if Mueller finds that some of Trump's aides did collude with Russia interfering in the 2018 election, Mueller might very well find that Trump had, quote, plausible deniability. Remember that phrase? Doesn't that come from Watergate? Now, top guns, whether they are president who have been involved in wrongdoing, or they are CEOs who have been involved in wrongdoing, top guns often arrange the wrongdoing so they can plausibly deny that they knew it was occurring. That's the art of the deal. You think Trump did that? Let's be very clear about this. There is already enough evidence to impeach Donald Trump right now on grounds of, number one, abuse of power. Number two, obstruction of justice. Number three, failure to faithfully execute the law. I don't have to write down all of these things. And number four, violation of the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution, taking gifts from foreign governments. There's already enough evidence of his mental impairment. He acted last night as unhinged as I have ever seen him. He can't even be coherent. He doesn't make a coherent English sentence without a teleprompter. He has enough evidence of his mental impairment to invoke the 25th Amendment. Look at the 25th Amendment. My friends, get your Constitution out. Now, I know removing Donald Trump would mean having Mike Pence as president, but to me, and maybe I'm old-fashioned, a principled right-winger is better for America and the world than an unhinged sociopath. A Republican as well as Democratic members of the House and Senate must commit themselves to removing this president. Those of you represented by Democrats in the House or the Senate, you've got to get their commitment to remove him as soon as possible. Those of you represented by Republicans in the House or Senate, you've got to let them know that you will campaign vigorously against them in 2018 unless they commit to removing Trump as well. It's just time to end this disgrace. In the meantime, Trump should be made irrelevant. Goodbye. It may be starting to happen, making Trump irrelevant. Trump no longer has a working majority in the Senate. Why? Because several Senate Republicans have decided the hell with him. Those Senate Republicans, they deserve our thanks and encouragement. As you remember, 3 Republican senators voted against repealing the Affordable Care Act, dooming this effort. Almost all Republican senators recently voted to restrict Trump's authority over Russian sanctions. They're pushing forward with their own inquiry into Trump's Russian connections. And also, something that you need to congratulate Republican Senators Tom Tillis and Lindsey Graham, they've joined Democrats in introducing legislation to protect Special Counsel Robert Mueller from being fired. Even Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell of all people, he's angry with Trump. Reportedly, he said that he was uncertain Trump can salvage his administration. Now, this is Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, Trump's major ally. Trump has alienated almost everybody. Even Republicans in the House, they're not going to fund his wall. Many refuse even to increase the national debt in order to pay for his promised tax cuts for corporations and the wealthy. After Charlottesville, many more Republicans are willing to criticize Trump publicly. I don't know if you caught this, but last week, Tennessee's Bob Corker. Now, Bob Corker is not nobody. I mean, he's chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee of the Senate. Bob Corker, questioned Trump's, quote, stability and competence, unquote. He said Trump has not shown he understands the character of this nation. And without that understanding, our nation, said Corker, is going to go through great peril. Now, this is Republican Senator, head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. It helps that Republican patrons in big business, big corporations, CEOs, they are deserting Trump in droves. Last week, CEOs bolted his advisory councils. Many issued sharp rebukes of Trump. Can I remind you, these are the people who raise big bucks for the GOP. Their dumping Trump makes it easier for elected Republicans to do exactly the same. Even James Murdoch, James Murdoch, he's the head of 21st Century Fox and all their media outlets, including Fox News, the Wall Street Journal, New York Post, among the loudest mouthpieces for Trump. James Murdoch, is distancing himself from Trump. He's the son of Rupert. Last Thursday, James Murdoch wrote that what we watched in Charlottesville and the reaction to it by the President of the United States concern all of us as Americans and free people. Now that notion of Rupert Murdoch's son, who's now at the reins at Fox News, the Wall Street Journal, saying that should concern, the president's response should concern all of us. Now, this doesn't mean Fox News or the Wall Street Journal will call for Trump's ouster, but it does mean their commentators and editorial writers now have clear license to criticize Trump. Hey, America as a whole is abandoning him. Trump's approval hit an all-time low of 35% last week. Even parts of his base, and that base, by the way, is no larger than 25% of the electorate, but even parts of his base are dropping him. I don't know, again, if you came across this, but our goal here is to pull up all of these strings together to connect the dots. And a new News Marist poll shows Trump's approvals have fallen 40% in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Now, these are the three states that were key to his election, which he won by a whisker. So the fact that his approvals have fallen to 40% in these key states is really indicative of what's happening to Trump's base. Even his base, are starting to change their minds. Inside the administration, inside the Trump White House, there are moves to contain him and isolate this man-child. On foreign policy, the axis of adults, and I'm talking about Chief of Staff General John Kelly, National Security Advisor General H.R. McMaster, and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, they are asserting tighter control, especially after Trump's tweet storm over North Korea. I mean, adults are mobilizing a little bit, and Stephen Bannon is gone. Now, Trump is still obviously talking to him. We saw last night in Phoenix, that was Trump, and that was Bannon kind of channeling Trump, and Trump channeling Bannon. But the fact that Bannon is not in the White House is significant. All of this, the desertion by Senate Republicans of Trump, the desertion of Trump by the business community, the desertion by so many Americans, the desertion of Trump and abandonment even of part of his base, all this means that although Trump will still hold the title of president, he may, with any luck, be on the way to being effectively removed from the presidency, kind of neutered, defanged, neglected. That's if Republicans in Congress have the integrity to put nation before party and stand up to the hatefulness and division and stupidity. And by the way, let's hope the media stop reporting Trump's tweets. And if they do, his isolation and irrelevance will be complete. Now, what happens next also depends on you. Your continued activism, your energy, your political engagement. I know it's hard. I was talking to someone this morning who said she had never in her life been so depressed and angry about this country and what Trump is doing to America and the world. And she said she felt exhausted. Well, I said to her, join the club. This is the price we pay for being citizens, participants, members of this society. This is the price we pay for caring about this country. And now your questions. Anthony Akoi. Did I pronounce that right, Anthony? There is a Patriot rally scheduled for San Francisco this weekend. Should we be concerned about white nationalists creeping out across the country? Look, the white nationalists, there have been white supremacists and white nationalists in this country for a very, very long time. If you know the history of racism and 19th century and the Ku Klux Klan and the lynchings, I mean, this is not exactly a new phenomenon. What's new is you've got a president who is, with a wink and a nod, legitimizing them. And we've got to make sure that we do not legitimize them. The less attention is paid, the better. No, we've got to stand up to them. We've got to stand up for democracy. We've got to stand up for tolerance. We've got to stand up for the Constitution. But don't let them shape the story. Michael Collins. When will Trump stop campaigning and start presidenting? Presidenting, Michael? Well, last night's rally in Phoenix was dubbed a campaign rally. It's the first time, frankly, I've been around for a long time. I have seen a lot of presidents. It's the first time I have ever heard of a campaign rally in the first 7 or 8 months of a presidency. So he's not a president. I don't think Donald Trump is president of the United States. I think Donald Trump is president of Donald Trump. I don't think he cares about the United States. I think he cares about Donald Trump. I don't think he feels accountable to the United States. I think he feels accountable to Donald Trump. So he's not going to start acting like a president. Daniel Burhane, is the attempt to repeal the Affordable Care Act over? Daniel, it is over pretty much for now. Most Republicans, and I talked to a few members of Congress, and I certainly talked to a lot of people around there, they are pretty much reconciled that the Affordable Care Act is there. It is the law of the land. Now, here's the thing to watch. Trump and the Trump administration, they still have a lot of ways of subverting, of basically undermining the act by not letting people know about the sign-up periods, by not providing insurance companies with enough clarity and assurance that that there will be federal funds, by essentially turning their back on the whole thing. And Donald Trump will say, well, I told you it's falling apart. No, it's falling apart. If it does fall apart, it's going to fall apart because of the Trump administration. And let's be clear about that. Joe Spagnano, did I get that right, Joe? How do we reach across the aisle and get work done as Americans? All I hear about is Trump. Well, one of the reasons all you hear about is Trump is that Trump is the one who's dividing us as Americans. The reason we can't work together as Americans is because Trump is trying to sow the seeds of divisiveness. I think that it is very important for us, as I said before, when we have Republican senators who are standing up to Trump, we need to congratulate them. We need to give them kudos. When we have Republicans, Democrats coming together as they should on infrastructure, why don't they come? I mean, the infrastructure of this country is falling apart, right? We all agree. If Trump had been a true president, he would have started on infrastructure first. Maybe we can get Republicans and Democrats to come together and actually repair our bridges and highways and all of the things, rapid transit, public transportation, all the things that need desperately to be invested in. Amy Richley, what can we do as a constituency to remove an unfit president? Well, Amy, as I said, it's going to take a little bit of time and patience to get him impeached. if we can get him impeached. The 25th Amendment is also out there. He certainly qualifies for getting removed under the 25th Amendment because he is not, I don't think, coherent. I frankly don't think he has all his marbles. But it's going to be hard going. I think your activism, your continued activism, 2018 is going to be critical if we have a majority of Democrats in the House and or the Senate. That will be helpful. But I wish I could say that this nightmare was going to be over very soon. I mean, maybe Donald Trump is going to be so frustrated and so neutered by all of this, in the sense of losing his power over the system, because everybody's going to be circumventing him, that he just, in kind of like a petulant 8-year-old, he picks up his coloring books and he leaves. He says, "I'm getting out of here. I can't stand this. And the hell with all of you." Well, that would be great. That's my dream, quite frankly. This is the last question. Heidi Cat Martin. Is that your name, actually? Glad you are back. How much longer will this nightmare continue? Look, I am hopeful that it will be over soon. But we, you and I and everybody else, we've got to be vigilant and activist as never before. Thank you for joining me tonight. I want to also thank Sasha Lightman and Andrew Santana, who have been continue to be enormously helpful, and we'll see you next Monday.